Someone please explain to me how it is already September because I feel like I'm still stuck in April. Here we are for another monthly reading wrap up. This one's for August, and I actually had a really great reading month for August. I ended up reading, I think, 9 books, which is a really good month for me, and quite a few of them were very good. So super happy to share this reading wrap up with you. Let me know in the comments what you read in August. Starting off really strong for me, I actually listened to the audiobooks for The Two Towers and The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. The audiobooks that I listened to were narrated by Andy Serkis, and it was so well done. I loved it so much. This was not my first read through for The Lord of the Rings, so I already knew that they were 5 stars for me, but it was my first time listening to the Andy Serkis narrated editions of the audiobooks, and I definitely really enjoyed this read through of it, and he did such an impeccable job. If you are ever interested in listening to The Lord of the Rings, or maybe you want to read them but you find them a bit intimidating and might prefer an audiobook, I highly recommend the Andy Serkis ones because the voices that he does for the characters are very similar to the Peter Jackson film adaptations, if you're into those, and he does a really good job at making everything interesting and really captivates the reader and makes you visualize what's happening. I loved them so much. So obviously the first 2 books of August for me were 5 stars. I already knew that going into it, but it was a really great way to kind of kick off August. Then I read The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. A few of these books I actually read in a vlog. This was one of them, and when I tell you I sobbed at the end of this book, it's not an understatement. I was holding back tears trying to explain my thoughts after I finished this one, and then when I went downstairs to, I think I was putting a book away or something like that, and my boyfriend kind of looked at me and was like, "Are you okay?" I just started sobbing again. This book made me feel things that a book has not made me feel in a very long time. If you are a cat person, I highly recommend it. If you are not a cat person, honestly, I highly recommend it. It is so good. So this book is narrated by a cat, and the cat's narration is absolutely hilarious, and he thinks things that I 100% believe my own cats think. I think that's all I'm going to tell you though, because I do not want to spoil this for anyone. I think this is the perfect book to kind of go in not knowing much about. This book was 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I will definitely be reading again in the future, but not for a little while. Then I read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This one I have been kind of putting off for a few years, and I ended up pulling reading prompts out of a prompt jar, and one of the prompts that I pulled was a book that's been turned into a movie, and this one caught my eye. I thought it was about time. It was good, but it wasn't as thrilling and suspenseful as I thought it was going to be. Of course, we have an unreliable narrator, and so that kind of reminded me a bit of Gone Girl, and I thought it was going to be like that, which it was in some ways, but not so much in others. I definitely found Gone Girl to be a little bit more suspenseful and made me feel more uncomfortable, whereas this one, there were definitely a lot of twists, but some of them I did see coming, and it didn't grip me as hard, so it was still good. I rated it 4 stars, and I do recommend this one if you like thrillers. I definitely think that the scariest part of this book is the last page, and I can't talk about it obviously because it's the last page, but if you know, you know. Next, I listened to a memoir called A Serial Killer's Daughter by Carrie Rawson. So this memoir was actually written by the BTK killer's daughter. So BTK was a notorious serial killer in the US from I think like the 70s to the 90s, and he ended up murdering 10 people and was finally arrested and convicted of those crimes in 2005. And his daughter, Carrie Rawson, knew absolutely nothing about him being a serial killer until the rest of the world also found out. So this memoir was basically about her coming to terms with that, and she talks about her childhood as well and how he acted towards her and her brother and her mom, and kind of the juxtaposition between how he was a family man versus how at the same time he was brutally murdering people. It's definitely an eye-opening read, and it's an interesting perspective. I personally could not imagine going through a fraction of what Carrie Rawson went through, so to read about her thoughts on it and stuff like that was super interesting, and I definitely recommend it if you're into like true crime and stuff like that. I will say, however, like just a little side note, it does get a bit religious at times. She talks about like her relationship with God and how it kind of changed over the years after finding out her father was a serial killer. So if you're not comfortable reading about religion, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Then I read 13 by Steve Kavanagh. This is another thriller murder mystery, and I did really like it. It definitely reminded me of Criminal Minds at times. So basically this one is about a murder trial, and the serial killer actually gets himself onto the jury, and it is a dual perspective. So one chapter will be from the perspective of the serial killer, and then the next chapter will be from the perspective of the defense attorney that's working this trial. So this one is pretty good. I ended up rating it 4 stars. The one thing I didn't know about it going into it was that this is actually the 4th book in a series. They are standalone books, but there were a few times where it felt like the author was alluding to something that I should already know, and I definitely didn't. I'd probably keep that in mind if you do plan on picking this one up. It didn't ruin the story or anything like that. It just definitely felt like I was missing a little bit of personal information about the defense attorney. Other than that, really, really great read, and I'm definitely going to be looking at other Steve Kavanagh books because this one was definitely my vibe. Next, I listened to the audiobook Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. This one was also narrated by Jill Duggar, and she is one of the kids from the infamous show 19 Kids and Counting that was on TLC for years. And this book is basically about growing up in the Duggar family, and then also she talked about what happened after 19 Kids and Counting got canceled, after all of these scandals that happened with Josh Duggar and then Jim Bob and Michelle, obviously, and how that affected her life and her family, and then also how she's moved forward after that and kind of how she lives her life now. It was definitely a very interesting read, and I learned things about the Duggar family that I had no idea about, like how none of the kids were ever paid for any of the shows that they did. Literally all of the money from it went to Jim Bob. Anyway, if you have any interest in the Duggars whatsoever, I highly recommend this one. Obviously, it also has a lot of religion kind of mixed in with it, so once again, keep that in mind. Next, I read Please Love Me at My Worst by Michaela Angemere. This is just a short little collection of poetry, and it's split up into 4 sections. So the first one is Please Love My Inner Child, the second one is Please Love Me at My Worst, the third one is Please Love Me for Who I Am, and then the fourth one is Please Love Who I'm Becoming. I really loved the first section and the last section. So Please Love My Inner Child was a little bit nostalgic for me, and there were ones that kind of hurt a little bit too because I related to them a little bit too hard. That's the thing about poetry, sometimes it feels like vindicating and other times it's kind of like, is this about me? But anyway, I did really enjoy this little collection of poetry, and I'm definitely going to be reading it again. I did rate it 4 stars, which is pretty good for me with poetry because I find with collections you can relate to some but not others. With this one, I feel like I related to quite a bit of it. There were a few that didn't really resonate with me, but for the most part, I really enjoyed it. And then the last book I read in August was 100% a 5-star read, and that is Whoa by Lucy Nisley. This one is just a cute little, like, bind up of comics about a house cat named Linny. A lot of the comics actually reminded me of my own cats, specifically Minnie, who is my oldest. She's 14, and Linny was actually 14, part of this as well. And then also my cat Eowyn, because she is such a little ham, and it seems like Linny was a little ham as well. Yeah, you're a ham. Oh, yes, you are. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. But if you love comics and cats, I highly, highly, highly recommend this one. It was such a fun time, super short and sweet. The art style is absolutely adorable, as is Linny, and it was really funny. So those are the 9 books that I read in August. I cannot wait to see what September holds, and then hopefully by the end of it, we'll be getting into some spooky books. But for now, I think I'm just gonna leave this video here. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and happy reading.